Welcome to our channel, HASHMICLINICS.
All right, in this explainer, we're going to do a deep dive into Adrenalinum. We're going to build its entire remedy picture from a really unique starting point, its raw physiological action. By the end, you'll have a rock-solid foundation for prescribing this powerful remedy with real confidence. So, to truly get a grip on Adrenalinum, you have to start with its source, the hormone adrenaline. You see, the remedy is the potentized form of this incredibly powerful chemical. It literally captures the very essence of the body's acute fight-or-flight response. And you've got to remember this, because every single symptom we're about to discuss traces right back to this one fundamental action. So here's our game plan. We'll start with the source, and that state of sympathetic overdrive it creates. From there, we'll explore its powerful effects on the vascular system and its key organ affinities, before we jump into the practical stuff, clinical application, and some crucial prescribing pearls. Okay, let's dive right into our first key area, sympathetic overdrive. This is the absolute core of the adrenalinum state. I want you to imagine the body's alarm system being triggered, and then the off switch just breaks. The whole system is pathologically stuck in high alert, and it's this sustained, grinding tension that really starts to paint our remedy picture. Just think about it. What happens when an alarm just won't shut off? Eventually, you burn out, right? Well, this chronic overstimulation is exactly what leads to the profound mental state of adrenalinum. The system gets so completely exhausted that you start to see this paradoxical picture of apathy, a deep despondency, a complete aversion to any mental work, and a characteristic lack of what our old materia medicas so perfectly called grit. And here we have it. This is the paramount keynote of the remedy, a true guiding symptom if there ever was one. You see, this isn't just a physical complaint. It's the perfect inseparable fusion of a profound mental state, that anguish, with an intense physical sensation of constriction in the chest. When a patient describes this feeling to you, adrenalinum has to immediately jump to the front of your mind. You know, this whole theme of constriction leads us directly into adrenalinum's primary physical action, which is on the vascular system. And this is where we see a really dramatic dual effect. You've got this intense constriction on one hand, and then a paradoxical control over hemorrhage on the other. So first, let's look at the constriction. What it does is it powerfully tightens the peripheral arterioles, especially in the splanchnic area, and that leads to a really rapid rise in blood pressure. This action is the source of its indications in hypertension and arteriosclerosis, and it's exactly why it's such a critical remedy for shock or heart failure during anesthesia, where you need a prompt pressor effect, and you need it fast. Now, here's the fascinating part. That very same constrictive mechanism makes it an invaluable astringent. It arrests capillary hemorrhages where local application is possible, from the nose, the stomach, the uterus. So the crucial point to remember is this. Think adrenalinum in cases of passive, oozing blood that just shows very little tendency to coagulate on its own. Okay, so now that we've got a handle on the core action on the nervous and vascular systems, let's take a look at where this remedy really acts most powerfully. We're going to explore the key organ affinities that give us adrenalinum's most characteristic and, frankly, most reliable particular symptoms. Its action on the lungs is just profound. That same theme of constriction we saw in the keynote, well, it appears here as intense bronchial asthma with a terrifying, overwhelming sense of suffocation. This is what makes it such a crucial rescue remedy in something like status asthmaticus. And this brings us to one of its most famous clinical applications, Addison's disease. The remedy's origin in the suprarenal gland is just front and center here. So when your patient presents with this classic triad of bronze skin, progressive wasting, and a profound weakness, adrenalinum has to be a primary consideration. It's almost a textbook picture. The heart, of course, well, it bears the brunt of this constant overstimulation. And this manifests as angina pectoris, often with that very same constrictive anguish we talked about, as well as palpitations and an exceedingly rapid, often intermittent pulse. But the remedy's influence extends even further. You have to think of it in sudden, intense states, things like neuralgia and sharp nerve pains, acute fiery inflammation of the conjunctiva that interestingly blanches with local application, and those explosive allergic reactions like hay fever and urticaria. Even nausea and vomiting fit this picture of a sudden, violent systemic disturbance. So, let's bring all of this into the clinic. How do we apply this knowledge at the bedside? We'll take a look at potency selection, and just as importantly, how to differentiate adrenalinum from its closest similars. This is where the rubber meets the road.
For those acute, really life-threatening conditions, I'm talking severe bronchospasms or shock, clinical experience really suggests using low potencies, like the 3x, to get a more direct physiological effect. But on the flip side, when we're treating the deeper constitutional tendency, like in chronic hypertension, we need to address the vital force's underlying pattern. And this is exactly why Dr. Yingling reported such great success with higher potencies like 200C or even 1M, because those target the dynamic disturbance itself. Now, in cases of Addison's disease, a really key differential is cecal cornutum. I know arsenicum might come to mind for the anguish and wasting, but cecal also has that bronzed skin. But listen, the differentiation is crystal clear. Adrenalinum's skin is simply bronzed, while cecal's tends towards blackness and even gangrene. The hemorrhage in adrenalinum is passive and non-offensive, which is a stark contrast to cecal's dark, fluid, and often putrid bleeding.
Okay, to bring this all together, let's distill it all down to the essential prescribing pearls. I want you to think of these as your go-to memory aids for spotting adrenalinum when you're in a busy clinic. If you can, keep these 4 pillars in mind. They really form the core essence of the remedy. You've got the pathological state, the guiding keynote, the classic triad, and the dual physical action. Trust me, together, they will guide you to a successful and very precise prescription. And that wraps up our deep dive into the physiological and clinical picture of adrenalinum. I'll leave you with this final question to reflect on in your own clinical practice. In those sudden cases of collapse, acute asthma, or that tricky unexplained hemorrhage, could adrenalinum be the remedy you're missing? Thank you for joining me.
Professor Dr. Rafat Hashmi is a distinguished homeopathic physician, educator, and researcher with over 4 decades of clinical and teaching experience. He is widely respected for his deep command of materia medica, repertory, and constitutional prescribing, combined with a practical, patient-centered approach. Dr. Hashmi has dedicated his career to training generations of homeopathic doctors, blending classical principles with modern clinical insight. He is also known for his innovative work in digital homeopathy, developing educational content, clinical tools, and AI-assisted systems to enhance remedy selection and case analysis. With a strong commitment to ethical practice and lifelong learning, Professor Dr. Rafat Hashmi continues to guide, inspire, and elevate the standards of homeopathic education and patient care.